Candice, would you like to kickstart and introduce us to what we will
Yep.
be talking about today?
Right. Now let's officially start our discussion on today's topic. Mental health is a very broad topic, and especially in Malaysia, one that is attached to stigma. However, having experienced the difficulties and uncertainty of the COVID-19 pandemic, it has become more important than ever that we address issues pertaining to mental health. We are also students, and various studies reveal that individuals our age are more prone to suffering from mental health difficulties. This could be due to the unique pressures we face in school, rapid changes occurring around us as we grow, and generally trying to socialize and make friends. This is especially true for those of us who are studying abroad in unfamiliar environments. Today, we are honored to have with us valuable panelists who possess diverse experiences in the area of mental health. Through this Swara Muda, we aim to shed light on managing our mental health, as well as to discuss mental health policies in Malaysia. We want to hear how Malaysia should move forward to become a leader in formidable mental health policy.
And with that, we would like to introduce some of our very amazing speakers we have with us here today. So our first speaker will be Ms. Amanda Kwa. She is a licensed and registered counselor in Malaysia and is currently a digital health coach at Naluri since 2022. Thank you, Amanda, for joining us today. Next, we have YB Sherlida Abdul Rashid, Member of Parliament representing Bukit Bendera, Penang. She is a strong advocate for various causes from mental health to sexual abuse and exploitation. It is a pleasure, YB, to have you here with us today. Unfortunately, YB will have to leave prior to our Q&A session, so please make sure to get in your questions and ask them early. And last but certainly not least, we will hear from Associate Professor Dr. Prem Kumar Chandrasekaran. He is the head of neurobehavioral sciences at Penang Adventist Hospital and has extensive experience in research and teaching at the RCSI and UCD Malaysia campus. Doctor, it's great to be with you today. All right, shall we kickstart with our discussion then?
Yes, now let's begin with our discussion. We want to highlight the importance of mental health among students, particularly those studying far away from home. After all, mental health shouldn't be a topic to address when issues arise. It's a continuous journey requiring proactive steps. And one of our goals at MASCA is to empower students with the knowledge and tools they need to protect their mental health. This will help them develop academic resilience too. So we'd like to hear from you, Ms. Amanda, about what you have to say to our students. So first off, it's important to recognize that mental health issues can affect everyone, regardless of age, gender, or background. Are there any general habits that could help us avoid mental health challenges?
Hi, Candice. I think when we talk about habits that can avoid mental health challenges, I personally feel that there are many. To begin with, I think number one, it's important to firstly identify what typically causes sort of mental health, I guess, challenges for you. So awareness is key. I think without first being aware of what makes you feel a certain way or react a certain way, it's also going to be very difficult to then address these things. So firstly, I think just typically reflecting, and I think, I it's not too long ago that I myself was an international student. So I can kind of recall in some sense, I guess, what are some typical things. And I think a lot of them for students living overseas would then be things related to sort of transitioning from living away from your families, kind of being abroad in a different country. And I think the culture is different. You also have kind of stresses from your studies, your kind of academics, your grades especially, right? And so then I think it's important to then identify what exactly are some of these things that might be kind of giving you the triggers for your mental health. Because I think from there, then you kind of understand what you need to do as well. So I think awareness is very important. And typically, I would say then one thing that really helps, and it has helped for me as well in the past, is actually to journal and to kind of reflect. So I typically then in the past would keep sort of it doesn't have to be very complicated, right? But I think at the end of the week, at the end of like a daily, of course, if you're kind of hardworking, but I think weekly works as well, because then it's also reflecting on, you know, what were some of the things that perhaps didn't go so well in the week, right? And what are the things that have made you feel a certain way? And so then having that journal in place and kind of reflecting helps give that awareness. And then I think beyond that as well, some other habits that I think are super helpful is I'm a firm believer of holistic health. And so I think that our mental health is also very much affected by our physical health. And I think sometimes as students, with tight deadlines and things like that, it's very easy to forget to take care of our physical health as well. We end up not eating well, not sleeping well, and I think exercise also kind of goes down the drain, right? But I think it's super important to recognize that health really is holistic, and I don't think mental health can just exist on its own if we don't first take care of our physical health as well. So I think putting in place some habits, and I think just establishing a routine or a structure is also very helpful. So ensuring that we get sufficient sleep, and I know there's going to be times when there's deadlines, right? And so then there is a lack of sleep. But I think as much as possible to readjust and kind of find that proper cycle again, so that you are able to get the sufficient sleep you need. And exercising, honestly, we think of exercise as like a like this super difficult thing that we need to like allocate an hour or 2 hours a day to do, right? But that's not true, because research has shown that a simple light exercise, even as long as 10 minutes a day, is actually able to help regulate low moods. So 10 minutes, right? And I think I wasn't in Australia, but I think as students, you walk quite a bit as well, right? So even taking kind of like, taking kind of like time to just walk, 10 minutes and things like that, those walks that you take can actually really help improve low mood. So just finding ways to incorporate these things into your daily life, instead of kind of thinking of exercise as just like a whole hour chunk time that I need to put aside to do, that's also super helpful. And I think the last thing that I would like to talk about in terms of habit is also, again, in terms of your diet, because a lot of things that we eat or don't eat can actually also kind of affect our moods. So for example, things like caffeine is one, right? So caffeine causes and I know we use coffee to stay awake, but I think we also need to be mindful, because caffeine then also actually causes kind of increased levels of certain hormones, and it elevates your heartbeat. And so that actually kind of, to the body, it doesn't necessarily know how to differentiate it. So then it kind of almost feels like elevated, like a stress response, right? So I think things like that are also important. But there are also certain food that again helps kind of also kind of regulate your mood. So I think it's important to ensure that the diet that you're eating is also balanced, typically kind of high in protein, and also getting enough fibers and things like that. Those are actually essential habits that I think are often overlooked when we're trying to take care of our mental health. Yeah.
Well, thank you so much for sharing that, Ms. Amanda. Like, I'm a big fan of exercise myself. So like that is like I definitely agree with all the points that you just said. And I also really like you mentioned, that I think like something as simple as just taking a walk is very good in being able to find a certain sense of inner peace. So like that is like, I definitely agree with that. With that, like, because we're all university students and most of our viewers are as well, so academic struggles can stem from various factors, such as the difficulty of the coursework, personal issues, time management problems, or even a lack of motivation. So what would you advise to students to tackle mental health problems that arise specifically from study stresses such as these?
So I think firstly, it's important to, I think, number one, know that your lecturers, your tutors, and the people that you have around there, right, are there to support you. I think sometimes we're also scared to ask for help. We're also scared to ask for guidance, or if we need clarifications and things like that, right? And so I want to empower all the students and to really kind of let you know that your tutors, your lecturers are really there to support you. So I think if you do feel that there are struggles contributing to your own kind of mental health issues that stem from studies, and I think sort of like not being able to catch up or falling behind and things like that, do let your tutors, your lecturers know, because then they would be able to provide the guidance that you need. Second thing I think is establishing like a routine, and also looking into time management. I think oftentimes as students, we struggle with properly managing our time. And so I think that cascades into a lot of different issues, because once you're not able to manage your time properly, you then realize like my assignment is due in 3 days and I probably have not started and things like that, right? And that causes a lot of stress and a lot of like anxiety, because naturally then your grades depend on your assignment, and not completing or not submitting on time will of course then affect your grades. So I think it's also kind of understanding what exactly do you need to do and kind of working backwards, right? So if you know you're typically someone who needs a bit more time, and you have a certain way of doing things, I think allocating time and working backwards in terms of your time management would then be able to help create some structure for you, so that you are less likely to be in a position where then things like that could happen. Of course, with that being said, I think it's also important to then recognize that every now and then a little bit of stress is bound to happen, right? And is going to happen, because I think it's impossible to live life without stress. In fact, stress can sometimes be a positive thing, right? I think if we know how to use it and channel it correctly, stress can really be positive. But it's also then recognizing I can't get rid of stress 100%. And so sometimes a little bit of stress is going to be there, but working through it instead of kind of feeling like I am now feeling stressed, therefore I have failed, because that's not true. Everybody's going to feel stressed. It's really a matter of kind of working through it to be able to then do the things that you need.
Perfect. Thank you for your answer, Miss Amanda. Yes, I do think that sometimes as international students, it's so easy to forget that there are people there to support you, especially when you're alone in a new country. And time management is also very important as a student, because sometimes we have part-time jobs along with our coursework and assignments. So yes, thank you for that. And now moving on to the next question. As students abroad, I think we can relate to this. Psychology consultations can be expensive for us international students. Where should students draw the line between trying home remedies and reaching out to a counselor?
Okay, so I think firstly, there is going to be, of course, some struggles. And I think, of course, there are lots of home remedies these days and lots of kind of self-help tools available that you can use. And you can find them, of course, online and through different apps, different platforms. I think it's great to be able to then do this, right? And also to then work on building resilience, so then you're able to kind of help yourself. But I think for me, where the line really is if you've kind of tried all these different things and you realize that they don't seem to be working, number one. And I think number two is also when you start recognizing that you've started to lose interest or kind of no longer feel joy in things that made you happy or did bring you joy in the past. And this is happening for a prolonged period of time. Also, I mean, it's pretty obvious for this, but I have to point it out, right? When you start having like sort of really high risk behavior, like there's been thoughts or there's been attempts and kind of with hurting yourself and things like that. So when those things come up, then I think it's really a warning sign that self-help kind of tools and home remedies are probably no longer working. And you do need to seek professional help. And I also want to address, Candice, what you mentioned about psychology consultation can be really expensive for international students, right? And I think the first thing that I want to point out is to actually leverage on the resources that you probably already have around you. And I don't know if students are aware, but I think most, if not all universities will have free counseling services for their students. So as long as you're enrolled in the university as a student, you would be entitled to then get free counseling services. So I think instead of going outside above and beyond your own kind of means to access help in terms of counseling, firstly, leverage on the services that you already have with you. So your university counseling kind of centers, because they would be able to kind of provide you the help that you need. And I think secondly, there are also kind of like NGOs and things like that, and even care lines that are able to then give you immediate help. So 24/7 services. I think Australia has Lifeline, has Beyond Blue. So these are some of the places I think that you can immediately call and immediately get help. If at all you start to feel like, there are some of these warning signals that I think needs to be addressed by a professional.
Thank you so much, Miss Amanda, for your answer. In the meantime, do any of the other speakers have any thoughts on what we have discussed so far?
I really must thank Amanda, because she's basically covered everything. There's nothing much else for us to say. But just to put everything in a summarized form, yes, exercise is important. Looking out for yourself. You are in a foreign place. Try to make friends, engage in hobbies, and you can try self-help remedies. But the moment there are symptoms that affect you to the point that you are unable to sleep, or you lose your appetite, or you have difficulty focusing on your studies, you need to seek help. And don't be shy to seek help. There are helplines, all right? And like Amanda mentioned, the counselors in the university, and it's free of charge. You don't have to worry about the cost, and you're not going to be discriminated against. There is no stigma, more so in a foreign country. So, it's not going to go back to your department or your lecturers. It'll be totally confidential.
Sounds good. Thank you so much for sharing, Doctor. Does YB have any thoughts on this as well?
Absolutely. And thank you so much for the amazing sharing, Amanda and Dr. Prem. The thing about when we discuss mental health, there's a lot of stigma. There is. And this is where, I believe everybody here can agree that, number one, when you come across toxic people, it is okay to let them go. I think you should, because when it comes to mental health, especially as students, this is a very important thing to protect. Definitely, the connection, the link between physical health and mental health, it's together. And I love the fact that, food, nutrition plays a very important role. I so agree with that. And this is where diet comes in, nutrition. You have to make sure that you are, you just take care of yourself physically. And when it comes to managing your time, as students, this is also very important. Also, this is something that I always tell my staff in doing what I do. And you have to manage your time properly. Work backwards. I love that point. This is also what I tell everyone. You have a deadline, work backwards, and then just make sure that you don't procrastinate, because when you do, then things, you have to start doing things at the last minute, and then that creates stress. So it's a cycle that you need to also get away from. But coming back to, I just wanted to add a few things about keeping a very calm, approach to things. When you come across something that heightens your sense of stress and whatnot, a few things that you could also do apart from taking walks, which is it's wonderful. Things like meditation, yoga, doing yoga, Pilates. It's just, you need to have that me time as well. And again, being students, we were all students at one point as well, and we understand the challenges that you all face. And again, I cannot stress on how important it is, if you come across something that you find disturbing, you're unsure, reach out and talk to someone. Whatever it is, do not hold it inside. Never do. And whatever in life, always know and always understand that you always have a support system, be it in organizations, your friends, or even your families.
Very well said, YB. Agree with the fact that we should all definitely take time to engage in things that we love. And by engaging in things that we love and surrounding ourselves with people that add excellent value positive value into our lives. Like it definitely helps like a tremendous lot. So just like a quick question perhaps for all speakers. So in what do you think about in your experience, is there something that students are doing these days that is potentially causing a statistical increase in mental health illness, or is that merely because the stigma is slowly being broken and therefore that comes with greater societal acceptance and hence diagnosis rates go up?
I personally think that students nowadays are putting too much of focus on results. I mean, during our time, our parents were the ones who were actually expecting results from us, good results. But nowadays, I find that the students themselves are putting too much of stress on themselves, and they need to take a step back and realize that, yes, you've been sent overseas, you have to finish the course, but you also have to you also have to have that me time. And as much as you can, enjoy your time abroad. And that studying bit, the moment you feel happy with yourself, you will be able to focus on your studies. And as you said, Xiaolu, there is a better acceptance now where mental health is concerned, and that's why a lot of these issues are emerging. But as mentioned earlier, I think we should be, we should be more open to the fact that there is help, and we should take the initiative to go and seek help.
Very excellently said, Dr. Prem. Thank you so much for answering the question. All right then. So we will move on to section 2 with this. So now when we think about mental health, of course, personal actions are a very crucial key aspect to it. However, there is a systemic problem that we ought to consider because a big part of mental health is how we interact with the people around us. And this includes day-to-day interactions when we study or work or socialize, and also when we are seeking help. So YB Selena, as a member of parliament, I'm sure you would have extensive knowledge on some of the laws and policies that exist in Malaysia surrounding mental health. So I want to start this section with a discussion with quite a broad question. So what does it take to come up with a healthcare policy, and what are the considerations that go behind every law?
Right. So in Malaysia, for example, we have the Mental Health Act 2001, which plays it is a very significant piece of legislation. Basically, it focuses on mental health issues and protection for individuals. So the Act provides as a framework for the care and treatment of individuals that may have mental disorders. First of all, it aims to ensure that the rights are protected, and also these individuals are able to receive appropriate care. Now, so basically, fast forward in May, rather, in 2023, there were a few amendments, and well, with these amendments was already passed, by the way. It's just basically to empower that, number one, crisis intervention officers or given the authority to, for example, detain individuals who are believed to have mental disorders, especially if they are perceived as a danger to themselves and also on brink of committing suicide. Also in Malaysia, until recently, we've basically decriminalized suicide, which is a wonderful step forward. So these amendments, it's a part of what do you call it, like a trio of legislative changes, making pivotal, monumental changes in Malaysia's legal approach. Transitioning from penalizing suicide attempts, is what I mentioned, to recognizing these individual survivors as manifestations of mental health issues that require therapeutic intervention. So while there's general support for revising the Mental Health Act, lawmakers, for example, have also raised concerns regarding the competency and qualifications of these investigating officers. And, for example, like managing how they can manage these individuals, because that itself, you wouldn't have to have a set of qualifications, a set of people who would know how to approach these individuals. So it goes back with the whole stigma of, we all know that surrounds mental health. And apart from all of that, this is where discussions pertaining to mental health is so much needed. And this is where I believe it's not just, what happens in Parliament, it's not just the decision makers, but also communities. We need to continuously talk about it and also make it known that whatever stigma that exists, whatever taboo that exists, it's not real and it can be broken down.
Thank you so much for that, YB. I think with the amendments in mental health policies Malaysia has made, it's definitely a step forward for the country. However, when it comes to workplace discrimination, a quick search may reveal that Malaysia doesn't do too well with this. So, for example, many jobs immediately disqualify applicants, and employers seem to lack stringent protections if a case of mental illness has been discovered. So, should more laws be implemented to protect against discrimination on the grounds of mental health history, and if so, what laws?
I think the laws that we have, it's there, but the problem is with the execution and also the mindset of basically enforcement. So it's an ongoing discussion, and honestly, talking about discrimination that people face at workplace, this is a topic that some of the MPs are currently raising as well. As you know, Parliament's currently in session, still is, and very soon we'll have the debates, perbahasan peringkat jawatan kuasa, and actually these are the issues, these are things that I intend on raising. It's still a long ways ahead, still a work in progress, but have faith that right now we do have a very good chance, because there are individuals out there who will talk about it, and also decision makers continuously talking about it. And this is our way of moving forward and trying to find solutions that can benefit everyone.
Amazing. Thank you so much, YB. With that, like as you mentioned earlier, so recently there was the very recent decision to decriminalize suicide. So was this decision to decriminalize suicide, in your opinion, enough to support suicide victims, or what do you think more can be done in the long run?
So this act itself, this is, for me, I personally think it's a definite move forward, because you already have the regulations and legislative recognition. So, but what needs to be done, this is not the end, is that we need to also empower the support systems that exist. We also need to make sure that communities have these helplines, support system, people to go to. And also what I would like to focus on is, for example, the chief investigating officers. This is where it is important. While we have the system set up, we need to make sure that the people in place, the people who are there to safeguard these individuals, know how to tackle issues pertaining to mental health. It's a very complicated issue, and this is where we also need to have thorough discussions with people within the industry, like Dr. Prem, qualified individuals to also help the system, help the investigating officers.
Yeah, thanks for that, YB. And now we would like to ask all the speakers to give an input on this. What do you think, in your opinion, are the best laws that Malaysia has? We know that Malaysia doesn't do too well, but if there are anything that, in terms of mental health policies, that the country is doing well, better than other countries, we would love your input.
Basically, from my point of view, the Mental Health Act, Malaysian Mental Health Act, was drafted in 2001, but it only came into effect around 2011. So it took 10 years for everyone to sort of absorb and digest everything. It is a fairly good set of laws, but the thing is, it is not enough. It needs to be further looked into, because if you are talking about how, the powers that a medical officer has in detaining someone, at times it does seem a bit brutal. So that needs to be sort of fine-tuned, but it is definitely a step forward compared to the Lunatic Ordinance Act that was still existing in Sabah when I was working there, where anyone who is friendless or homeless can be admitted into a mental hospital. I think I know a lot of people who could be put in based on those criteria. So we have come a long way. Yes, I agree that even the new laws, 2023 has been a very, very good year where laws protecting those with mental illnesses are concerned. And repealing Section 309 was definitely one of them, because we worked very hard from the psychiatry chapter in the Academy of Medicine, and we kept writing articles into the papers saying that you can't criminalize someone for attempting suicide, because, and I have to admit, and I'm not ashamed to say that I have been one of the many psychiatrists who contributed to the lack of data concerning suicides, because by right I have to make a police report that someone commits suicide, but they are already in a state of despair. How do I go and get the police in? And whether the police are going to treat it in a humane way, all right? The whole process of interrogation, it might make them actually attempt suicide again. So we decided that we are not going to, and we actually informed the Malaysian Psychiatric Association about it, that until things change. So we were actually quite happy when they repealed Section 309. And there are a few other laws that were like what YB Shalina had mentioned. We are quite happy with them, but of course they need to be fine-tuned. But my take is, don't make too many laws. People are supposed to use their minds and think. If you're going to put too many laws for people, everyone just becomes robotic and just starts following things. Let's think about what would be best to help someone with a mental illness. And how do you do this? You start early. So our chapter of psychiatry from the College of Physicians, Academy of Medicine, we're actually drafting out a request for the Ministry of Education to start considering that mental health issues should start from say later, and standard 4, standard 5, where students can start understanding that caring about another person is important. And we are going to go quite hard with it. And I've actually spoken to another YB, Ram Karpal, whose brother happens to be my neighbor. So there's quite easy access to him. And he was the one who actually pushed us to start writing in about the laws on to decriminalize suicide. And now we're actually going to go into inserting, probably in the subject of civics, right? Teaching younger children how to recognize or be more compassionate towards those with possible mental difficulties. Of course, we'll have to word it properly so we don't scare them and we don't scare their parents. But I think that is really going to help. So you have this generation of people who will grow up realizing that there should not be any stigma towards mental illness. We've actually managed to get the white paper through where the end game, generational end game is concerned, where smoking after, what is it, YB, 2007, is it? Those born before, those born after 2007 will not be allowed to purchase cigarettes. So, that is a law. It is a bit hard hitting, but it's for the betterment of future society, for our next generation's survival, and to produce people who are going to be empathetic towards the mental health of others and be a supporting factor. I think that's going to go a long way.
Very beautifully said, Dr. Prem. And like a lot of amazing work is being done right here. Like that is absolutely wonderful to hear. Like perhaps like YB would like to add on to what Dr. Prem has said, and like what are a bit of your thoughts about what Doctor has said so far.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. I love the fact that Dr. Prem mentioned about education, because I cannot stress enough on how education plays such an important role in shaping, the mindset of individuals. So when we talk about discussions of tackling mental health or any issues at all, I always believe that, having that holistic approach is always the best, because it teaches individuals, especially young children, how to think critically. So what we also need to do is, when we talk about revamping, or rather reforming the Malaysian education system, we need to go beyond the books, beyond class syllabus, and just focus on empathy, focus on EQ, for example. And what's also really important is that this is where we need to change the language. For example, the lunatic ordinance, the word lunatic itself, it doesn't conjure a very politically correct concept. So it's about framing the right languages. It's about framing the right ways on how we can have thorough discussions. Now, another one is the role of media. I believe that, this day and age in 2023, a majority of our stress, our self-imposed stress and everything else comes from social media, because this generation is being bombarded by a lot of information, and more so with the pandemic. For example, a lot of people were able to work from homes, and then that created a generation, a society rather, that could not find where do you stop from work and home? Things like that start to blur out. Now, media, as I said, plays such a crucial role in shaping public opinion. So if you look at TV shows, movies and whatnot, there's always that sensationalist, inaccurate portrayals of individuals that have mental health. And all these things, although it might seem small, minuscule, or even minor, it reinforces negative stereotypes. So again, press, media, whatever it is, has that responsibility to represent and promote a culture that is truly understanding and empathetic, and also incorporating mental health education is such a wonderful thing. This is definitely a way moving forward for us to create a more inclusive, society.
Amazingly explained, YB. I think that is like what we should be looking at, especially with the idea that the education is so important with shaping the young minds of our generation moving forward, as well as the media they consume, regardless if it's like shows, movies, books, things like that. With that, perhaps you would be best to advise us on how, as the rakyat, how can we perhaps encourage the government and our representatives and ministers and do our part in encouraging and getting our voice out there to encourage for the passing of better mental health policy in the future?
Very simple. Number one, continue talking about it, because we need discourse. We need to have these conversations, continue the conversations, and also write about it, be it tweets or even op-eds. Just continue writing, continue discussing, having more forums, talking to friends. And this is how you can also create a movement. And also, it's as simple as reaching out to any of the representatives, be it, a member of parliament, counselor, send us emails, just keep in touch. It's like Dr. Prem talking to one of his neighbors. These are things that we can do as citizens. Just continue talking about it.
Great,
Perfect.
thank you. Yep. Any more questions, Sheldon?
Yeah, I don't think so. But in the meantime, yes, like definitely agree with like what YB is saying regarding how we must encourage like discourse and like encourage that kind of like discussion because like by having that kind of discussion out there in the space, it's talked about and awareness is spread, and that's how you get like issues to be solved basically, and how policies are made and how people's voices are heard. In the meantime, Candice, would you like to take us to the next section?
Yep, so the next section will be about mental health policy relating to healthcare services. On the note of healthcare policy, Dr. Prem Kumar, you have worked as a psychiatrist for quite a while now, and you have extensive exposure in the public healthcare system. From your experience in healthcare settings, is the disparity between public and private spending on the quality of mental health services a significant problem in Malaysia?
Okay, I haven't worked in the government for very, very long, but I was on the board of visitors for Penang GH. So we used to go to the mental institution in Perak Road. And there is a huge disparity. Of course, they are overloaded in the government hospitals, but the work done is pretty good. And in private, patients have easier and more rapid access to us. And what we try to do is we try to work with the government. Like, for example, during the pandemic period, we offered to see some of their patients. But then again, because of the quarantine restrictions, a lot of patients did not turn up. But when they needed to come, they ended up coming to us in the private sector because they could come in and out. I mean, they could come into the hospital and leave within an hour. So in that way, the private sector did complement the government sector, but funding is a huge issue. The way funds have been cut, funds that were supposed to be directed towards medical care, which includes mental health, is a dismal amount compared to what used to be given or compared to what would make the government sector thrive. Now, if you look at Singapore, the best doctors and the most desired place to go to for treatment for mental health or any other illness, medical illness, is the government sector. The private sector exists. It exists mainly for those who could pay and they wanted to go in and out fast. Now, over here, people go to the private sector because they feel that the better doctors are there. That's not actually true. It's mainly because of accessibility. So this needs to change, and it needs a paradigm shift in our way of thinking. And the government has to help us with this if they want mental health or medical care per se to improve. Because I strongly believe, I've worked in the UK, I've worked in Australia, and I still feel that our medical care in Malaysia is one of the best in the world, but it can improve. there's always room for improvement.
Thank you for sharing your thoughts on that topic with us, Dr. Prem. And with that, so on the note of this conversation regarding improving access to mental health care, so what should we do to increase mental health experts working in the country, in your opinion? So statistically, Malaysia lacks in our number of healthcare professionals compared to World Health Organization recommendations. So should we be hiring more professionals or upskilling existing ones or both?
We have the expertise here in the country. It's just that the government is not looking properly into how to retain those good people. The way they treat contract MOs, medical officers, and basically, I feel they are being used for their expertise. No wonder everyone goes and joins a private clinic, or they join universities, or they end up doing a lot of things that is generally frowned upon. Now, you can't really blame them. They are not given any security. There's no pension. What would be the incentive, especially someone who's married with, say, 2 or 3 young children? They have to bring food to the table. And if the government is not going to look into these things, you're going to have more protests. I mean, I don't believe that doctors should go on strikes. But when they do, I normally just keep quiet. I don't criticize because they're doing it out of desperation. One of my colleagues, who was the head of emergency in Oxford, he actually told his juniors, please go and join the strike. I will do your work for you. For that half a day, he did it because he said that's important, because if not, you're going to get a younger generation of doctors who are not going to be proud of what they do. You want to go and see a doctor who's proud being a doctor, working for the government and providing the best standard of care. But the way things are, you're going to end up having this group of people who are just basically holding back, afraid that they are going to be sued, and in some countries such as India, afraid of being beaten up in front of their staff. So I think that this whole attitude towards mental health and basically medical care as such, it really needs a huge change in everyone's mindset.
Yes, thank you so much, Dr. Prem, for that valuable insight. And I think, well, there are definitely a lot of aspects Malaysia lacks in. And one of that is that there are many different mental health specialists. So there are therapists, counselors, clinical psychologists, psychiatrists, and the way that these people are added to the board of counselors, for example, in Malaysia, the laws behind that are variable and it's not very well defined. Do you think there are any issues that these can create for patients in general?
I've basically said all that I have to say. Maybe Amanda can help and can chip in, or maybe YB.
Yeah, I think on this note, just from a personal experience, I think the issue that Malaysia has as well when it comes to mental health professionals is really on things like registration and licensing of these professionals. So from what I'm aware of, the only one that's actually sort of quote unquote regulated is actually the Board of Counselors. But for psychologists and things like that, there's really nothing much in place. And it's and honestly, it has kind of created a bit of an issue because essentially anybody can go up and say that they are a psychologist, right? And there's no laws in place to then kind of ensure that people are actually properly and qualified to be like a psychologist and things like that. And there has been people going around, and I think this has also caused the public to kind of be confused, right? Because then I've heard of cases where then people call themselves psychologists, but they're actually prescribing like medication, and I don't know what medication as well is being prescribed. And so I think there definitely also needs to be proper kind of systems put in place to then ensure that we are able to properly identify and recognize mental health care professionals, to ensure that the people providing the care are also qualified and are able to actually provide the care that they say that they can, versus versus anyone just calling themselves like a psychologist or something like that, and kind of issues like that happen. So definitely I think that there is a lacking in this area, and which is something that the country, the government really needs to also kind of help the people put in place. Yeah, and maybe YB wants to add on that as well.
Just a quick one. So yes, when it comes to these issues, there needs to be better protection. When I just want to add a few thoughts. When the doctors go on strike, this really shows that there's a huge, major concern that needs to be addressed. And what's really sad is that this is a discussion that I've had with several of the MPs, and also the current EXCO for health in Penang. It raises a lot of questions as to what the previous administrations were doing, because healthcare, it's a fundamental right, and it's something that should never be compromised for individuals, and more so the protection and well-being of the professionals, the doctors. And we've had so many cases of discrimination, and how the officers were being mistreated, and begs the question, like, where do we start to address? But with that being said, there are a lot of things that can be done, and so regardless of the situation, this is where, like I said earlier on, continue talking about it. And with the current government right now, for example, the Belanjawan Madani 2024, which was just last Friday, I think, last 2 weeks. Basically, when it comes to healthcare, there's a lot of allocation. The budget was granted to healthcare. But with that being said, what was missing was basically the details for mental health is just not transparent in a sense. So where do we begin? But there you go. It's just something that you need to channel and address the growing needs within the area.
Your mic, Shalu.
Well, just basically it's a very interesting perspective from all the speakers, and thank you so much for sharing regarding your expertise, with regards to these ideas of mental health in Malaysia, as well as the role of doctors and such. With that, YB Selena, I believe, has to go off soon. So we just wanted to take this time to say thank you so much, YB, for sharing all these amazing insights about mental health, government role, as well as how policy is currently being done, the funding, etc. I believe all of us learned a lot, and I really enjoyed your insights. Thank you so much, YB.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you for attending, YB.
Thank you, YB.
Would you be willing to work with me on promoting mental health education in schools?
Absolutely.
I'll get your, if you don't mind, I'll get your number from Antoine.
Ken. So
My
take care.
son, by the way.
Take care, everyone. God bless.
Bye.
Bye.
And currently, as we speak, so many amazing work is being done by you, Dr. Prem, in initiating these kinds of things. Thank you so much. And with that, I wanted to ask Miss Amanda. So you did talk about various types of professionals. So perhaps some students may not be aware of these different categories of professionals. So since we have had several experts here with us today, could you walk us through the differences between a psychologist, psychiatrist, counselor, and etc.?
Yeah, sure. So I think firstly, And I think there's also, of course, sometimes a lot of discussions, right, about how we then kind of distinguish between counselors, psychologists, and psychiatrists. First and foremost, I think I'll get the one that I feel is the simplest out of the way, which is the psychiatrist. So firstly, psychiatrists are doctors. Like they would have gone through like med school, just like doctors would, and then they chose a specialization. And so of course, then it's psychiatry. And Dr. Prem, please feel free to correct me if I'm wrong. So essentially, as psychiatrists, then they can prescribe medication because then they're doctors. But for psychologists and counselors, we're not doctors. So firstly, if a counselor or a psychologist wants to prescribe you medication and tells you that they have medication for you, please be very, very careful, because as psychologists and counselors, we're not supposed to be prescribing you medication. And so now the difference between then counselors and psychologists. So I would kind of phrase it as typically counselors are people who would then kind of work with you more on issues related to kind of daily functioning struggles. Whereas psychologists, even though of course they still do and they do the same talk therapy as counselors do, psychologists then are specialized typically in things like assessments and diagnosis. So if you do need certain assessments done, certain screening done, then it would be your psychologist would be the best people to be able to do it, because as counselors are also not trained to be able to then do the assessment or also to kind of diagnose, right? So a counselor can't actually diagnose you and say that you have like anxiety disorders or you have like ADHD and things like that. For those kind of diagnoses to be done, proper assessment and screening needs to be done, and typically that's done by psychologists. And so then I think that for me is how I would distinguish the difference between a counselor, psychologist, as well as a psychiatrist.
Great. Thank you for that clear explanation, Ms. Amanda. So now, Ms. Amanda, Dr. Prem, thank you so much for sharing your insights during the interesting discussion. Really learned a lot about the areas of mental health policy that Malaysia is lacking in. And it's definitely something that the communities need to talk about and just share with everyone else. And definitely for these students out there, if you have heard Ms. Amanda's habits that you need to take to protect your mental health, please be aware that, go for a run, exercise, journal, and create a routine. So what about you, Xiaolu? What do you think?
Yeah, indeed. I think I found this discussion overall really quite interesting, because it's like I learned so much from all the speakers regarding like what Malaysia is currently actively doing to encourage the conversation and encourage protection of individuals with mental illnesses. So I think like that's something that is very amazing, and I think it's something that more people should be aware about, since it's not something that's widely discussed. And of course, as you've said, Candice, like it's amazing. Thank you so much, like Amanda, for also sharing with us those kinds of like tips on how to improve oneself and improve oneself's mental health at the same time. So, doing what you love and journaling, exercising, it's like, even though people think like these kinds of things may be a bit of a cliche sometimes, but if you really actively engage in it, I do think it's something that would significantly improve mental well-being if you do it on a consistent, regular basis. And also like big thanks to Dr. Prem as well for talking about a lot of the amazing work that he's doing in improving like conversations about mental health in Malaysia regarding education, alongside like YB just now. Like I think that has been absolutely wonderful. So thank you to both speakers for that. So with that, let's move on to the Q&A section, perhaps the section all of our audience has been waiting for the most. So during the discussion, we have received some very interesting questions for our panelists, and we also look forward to hearing what they have to say in response. And this is also a quick reminder that you can continue to ask questions on the comment section of our Facebook live stream. All right, now let's begin with our first question. And someone has sent in, I'm 19 and live with my family, and I find it difficult to balance my university activities with my domestic responsibilities. What should I do to strengthen my mental health so I have motivation to juggle my responsibilities? Which of the speakers would like to take this question first?
I think I'll let Amanda start.
I think this is bound to happen, right? I think when you live with your family, there's of course certain expectations that your family, your parents have as well. in terms of you contributing to like the household and, helping out with things that are going at home. And so sometimes I think, of course, then in certain like deadlines or certain, when certain things come and of course the load is heavy, then it becomes very difficult to be able to then juggle that as well as juggle things that are happening at home. I think firstly, before I go into the part about like strengthening your mental health, right? I think firstly, it is very important to also then kind of, I guess, reevaluate, right? To kind of look at the responsibilities that you have with home as well as with your university. Because I believe that ultimately, if you need help and if you feel like there is a difficulty and you are kind of really overloaded with things that are happening at home plus things that are happening at school, I think this needs to be voiced out as well. Ultimately, I think parents come from a place where they want the best for their children. And I think truly sharing that you might have struggles, being able to contribute with some things at home, given your workload from your university, is definitely the first step or the first thing that you should think about doing, having that conversation, having that open communication with your family, with your parents. Secondly, in terms of strengthening your mental health, right? So I think again, of course, not wanting to sound like a broken record, but I think ultimately it's also going back to, again, what I was mentioning previous in kind of like, what are some of your triggers? What are the things that you can let go of in terms of your responsibility, right? I think sometimes I think Dr. Prem also mentioned this, right? The generation today puts a lot of pressure and a lot of expectation on themselves. So you expect yourself to be able to be like an A-star student in everything, to get everything completed and whatnot, right? Sometimes I think it's also about deciding what you can let go of, because ultimately there are going to be 10,000 things on our plate. And I think one trick that I like to do is that I like to look at what are things within my control and what are things beyond my control. Because number one, things that are within my control are things that I have full control over. So I can do something about the problems or about issues that might be within my control. But I think the struggle often lies with students in the fact that, and not just students, by the way, also me, as a working adult and things like that, we often fixate on things that are beyond our control. One very big example, right, is if you guys have been to KL, then it's the traffic jam. Because no matter what I do, I will never be able to change the traffic jam in KL. And so these are things that are beyond my control. And I think very often we are stuck in this position where we're unable to distinguish what is within our control and what is beyond our control. And it feels like the load is really heavy because you're taking on so many things. So I think sometimes taking a step back, and I like to do a list, and I like to kind of just divide, right? Things beyond my control, things within my control, and I'll actually write them all down. Ultimately, I then tear the list, and things that are beyond my control, I accept that nothing I do will be able to change these things. And so instead, I choose to focus on things that are within my control, and I'll actually just tear out the sheet that of the things that are beyond my control. So I think that is that will greatly help you, number one, take off the load, understand what are the things that you can let go of so that you are not holding too many things on your plate as well, which will then cause you to, of course, crumble and break. So I hope that was helpful and answers the question.
Very amazingly said, Amanda, especially with the part where you talked about how you cope yourself. I think that is something that it would be very interesting to implement for many people in terms of being able to find your mental peace and letting go of things that are not within your control, basically. Does Dr. Prem have anything to add with this?
Basically, I think the pandemic actually taught us a lot about how to regulate our emotions, keeping connected with people. And I think students overseas should, take the cue from that. Have video calls, sessions with friends, keep connected. Like what Amanda said, realize that there are things beyond our control and we shouldn't focus on trying to be perfect in everything. Doing exercise, maintaining a positive mental outlook, all those things are really, really important. And if you do feel that you're struggling and you need to seek help, go ahead and seek help. Nowadays there's no discrimination. Your position in your university is not going to be affected just because you are having a bit of problem and may need to just speak to someone. And that's where the counselors in the universities, that's where they come in to help you regulate just that.
Candice, would you like to read the next question for us?
Yeah, so thank you for your insights. And now for the next question. What is the scene like regarding more specific mental or learning disorders? I feel like people now understand that if you're going through something tough, you would have bad mental health. But I think people forget that there are many disorders that could also impact someone but are less well known.
Basically, I would actually break down the majority of mental disorders that we find. I prefer not to use the word mental disorders. I would actually say emotional problems. And basically, I would break them up into mood problems that could be either depression or bipolar disorder. Then the next category would be those having psychosis. This includes schizophrenia and even brief reactive psychosis. And then you will have your range of anxiety disorders, and that would also include those disorders that are included with that would include those disorders that are concerned with pain in your body and so on and so forth. And the last would be basically personality problems where there would be manifestations of thinking and behaviors as a result of emotional trauma earlier in their lives. If you keep it simple, people would know how to recognize that they may be going through something. And it doesn't have to be bad. It could be just something that could be sorted out by a psychologist without even seeing a psychiatrist, such as personality disorders. But if it comes to disorders like mood disorders or psychosis or even anxiety disorders where there's chemical imbalance in your brain, then they would need some treatment. But treatment is not lifelong in most cases. It would be between 6 months to 2 years. And if it recurs after the medication is stopped, then we restart treatment.
Sounds
Yep.
good, Dr. Prem. Thank you so much for sharing that, and as well as your perception with regards to reshaping the language behind the word disorders and like discouraging the use of that and using more inclusive language when having discourse about ideas about mental health. So with that, with our third question, someone said, I once wanted to become a psychiatrist, but I was advised against this because of what you deal with in hospitals. So how true is this, and how can we encourage people to pursue psychiatry? With this, I believe that the person asking the question is saying that they were advised against becoming a psychiatrist because there's a negative connotation with what people have to handle in hospitals.
Well, the perception that you will end up having a mental disorder if you pursue psychiatry is widespread. Even my own family was against me venturing into psychiatry. But it's how you look at it. With technological advancement in the area of psychiatry, a lot of people now are more accepting of the fact that it's more due to chemical imbalance rather than um, rather than psychiatric problems being untreated. So they can be treated. And the thing is, you need to have a pretty good EQ to go into the field of mental health. And you have to know that there will be certain situations where you may not be able to do very much, but just being able to be there and provide some support is a start. Now, most of the reason I enjoy being a psychiatrist is because it is pure joy when your patient gets better. And my hospital wanted to give me a separate unit away from the hospital. And I knew that, that would cause a lot of stigma. So I insisted that my wards be within the medical ward. Of course, there are certain trained staff. My clinic is with the neurologist and neurosurgeon. And so that my patients are not kept in a place where people pass by and look into it just to see some sort of circus show. They mingle with everyone else. And the main thing is to let everyone know that, listen, these are patients too, as any other patient. And we want to normalize this so that people do not hesitate when they need to seek help. So going into psychiatry is not something that is frowned upon as it used to be. It is actually quite a desired specialty now. And I would actually encourage anyone who's interested in the area of mental health to actually go into psychiatry or psychology. And a lot of people actually do courses to become counselors, and we promote that. We fully support that.
Thank you so much, Dr. Prem. Now, Shalu?
Just real quick, I also wanted to ask Amanda, what perhaps do you think about this with regards to counseling? So like a similar angle with encouraging people to engage in the counseling field.
I think just to add on, I think Dr. Prem already kind of covered it, not just for psychiatry, because I think the same approach is also true even for like all mental health professionals. But I think it's really as simple as this, right? I think the mindset that I have is, if you really do feel that it's a passion and this is an area that you want to go into, I don't think you should let what society says deter you. I think previously, back when I was considering like to do psychology, counseling, basically to kind of go into this field of mental health, right? People then essentially said like, oh, like 50% of people who go into this field end up having issues themselves. And so of course I was a bit scared, right? But I think like what Dr. Prem was saying as well, it's as a professional as well, right? It's also then working on your own like EQ. It's also working on your own emotional well-being to also ensure that you are in a place where you would be able to take care of yourself. I 100% would encourage all mental health professionals and even people who are aspiring, right, to also remember that ultimately you are also a human. And so most mental health professionals go for their own like counseling sessions or their supervision sessions, right? Because then I think that's super important. And that's one of the ways that can also help you work on your own mental health. And so, and we talk so much about how Malaysia is lacking in terms of mental health professionals. I think our ratios are like super bad. I can't remember what it is exactly, but I think you guys were saying earlier as well, right? WHO has their recommendations, and we're of course super behind. And so I think the thought here is, if everybody in the country doesn't, recognizes that this is an area of gap and this is an area of need, but then choose to say like, oh, not me, let someone else do it, right? And if everybody had that same mindset, essentially we will continue to be in this space where then nobody enters into this profession, and we'll continue to be in this space where we are constantly lacking mental health professionals. Of course, admittedly, then better policies need to be put into place, and of course we need to support and kind of help the mental health professionals a bit better. But I think that first step really needs to come from your generation, right? The younger people, in wanting to make a difference, in recognizing the importance of this mental health field. Yeah.
Wonderful. Thanks for your perspective on this and issue, Amanda, and how you think we should encourage more young people to engage in these spaces and work in mental health advocacy. So with that, Candice, do you want to read out the next question?
Yeah, so the next question, I'm just curious, what does it take to draft recommendations, laws, and/or policies? What are the considerations? Where can I get experience in health policy as a young student?
It basically starts from having an idea. You may be a student, but that should not stop you from voicing your ideas. And you have a member of parliament, write to that member of parliament, engage with them and come up with something. Or you could actually approach any of the associations to carry your ideas out. For example, we have Malaysian Mental Health Association, in Malaysia, right? Malaysian Psychiatric Association. And I don't think anyone will take your ideas lightly just because you're still a student. Everyone's ideas are valuable, and it may actually stimulate us to think about the issues that the younger generation, such as you, are facing, and what you think could be done to rectify some of those issues. I honestly feel that I will actually treat it as valuable input and look into it. Now, from our side, I'm the chairman of the psychiatric chapter in the College of Physicians, Academy of Medicine. And you have my email, you can just write in and I can discuss it with our team.
All right, thank you so much for giving people a platform to be able to speak and share their thoughts with you, Dr. Prem. I think that is some really inspiring work from your end. Thank you so much for that. Does Amanda have anything to add on to this?
No, I think Dr. Prem has covered it pretty sufficiently.
Oh, good. All right, then shall we move on to the next question? Oh, this one is okay. A pretty lengthy one, I see. All right, so is there a clash between the demand and the expectations for psychologists? For example, in Australia, it's a lengthy pathway with 3 + 1 + 2 years, and it is extremely competitive to enter psychology. Do you think that this pathway should be shorter? As a psychology student, I know a lot of peers who drop out becoming engaging in mental health professions simply because of these barriers. So what do both Dr. Prem and Ms. Amanda think about this?
I think I think honestly, this is a tough question to answer, right? Because I think we recognize as well that, of course, I think this the person who asked this question also obviously then has people who he or she knows that has then dropped out because of how lengthy and I think how competitive and how difficult the pathway is then to essentially become a psychologist. However, I think we also need to be very mindful when we talk about things like shortening the pathway, because essentially to be a counselor, psychologist, in a mental health profession, right? I think there is a lot of it's lengthy because of a couple of reasons. So of course, as a typical degree, then you have like your theoretical kind of learning and studies that you do. But I think beyond that, working in the mental health profession is also very different from it's not something that I think you can just kind of do 3 years of studying and kind of go out and start practicing. Things like your practicum, your internships are super important, because then that's where you really kind of are on the ground and you're learning, and you're kind of also are more exposed to all the different issues that might be out there. And also, I think more importantly, there are a lot of potential crises that can come up. And I think for someone who, if I, for example, think about the fact that I didn't do my internship or didn't do my practicum, right? And if I was thrown straight into kind of like a crisis case when I started working, I wouldn't know what to do. I wouldn't know exactly, how to handle it. Who are the relevant people I need to reach out to, the authorities that I might have to get in touch with. And so I think while the pathway is lengthy, I think that it is there for a reason. It's to provide the training, to provide the experience, and to provide, and basically to, in some ways, I guess, ensure success for you when you graduate and when you start working. Because I think if we think about like a pathway as a doctor, right, it's even longer. And I think very similarly, while doctors work on physical health, mental health professionals work on mental health. And ultimately, we're dealing with a person and a person's life here. So I think that there is value in this sort of longer pathway, because it does provide a bit more, it helps a person to prepare a bit better. Yeah, those are my thoughts.
I would add in that the training is not only about your theoretical knowledge, there are practical aspects, like what Amanda had mentioned. But what is important here is the supervision you get. Sometimes halfway through the course, you realize that you're not cut out for it. And it would be better for you to drop out. Let me give you an example. You are expected to go in for an appendix operation, all right? It's considered urgent. Would you rather see someone who's half trained, if the person had trained for 2 years in surgery as opposed to the 4 years? Would you go and allow yourself to be cut up by someone who is not adequately trained? Of course you won't. Similarly, would you go and see someone who has not been supervised, who has done maybe 1 or 2 years of psychology or psychiatry, and put your life in their hands? Remember that in psychiatry, the reason we can prescribe medication is because we've gone through medical school. So we know how medications work, how they are absorbed, where it is broken down, their possible side effects. So all these things are needed. So definitely I would not agree to shortening the length of training. And it's during the training where, in addition to the theoretical aspects, there's also character molding. You are taught to become more resilient. If you can't handle it, okay, I mean, there always is the option to drop out. But a lot of people, they just trudge on with it, and they build their characters, and they become more resilient, as I mentioned before. So I think the requirements where the length of the pathway to become a psychologist, even a counselor, or even a psychiatrist is definitely warranted.
Thank you so much for giving your thoughts on that, Dr. Prem. I think that with what you said regarding character building, I think that is extremely important, not just for students in this field, but for students in general, and being able to take stress and challenges as a way to build personal resilience and personal motivation. I think that's a very important trait to have and something I personally value highly as well. And with that, so we have come to the end of our discussion session today. I just wanted to say thank you so much to Amanda, Dr. Prem, and YB from just now, from all the amazing insights and for your time today. Candice, do you have anything you want to add on?
Nope, just wanted to thank everyone for their amazing insights. I think people from all over the world face mental health issues, and every tip that has been said here can apply to everyone. Yep. So yes, thanks, Shalu.
Yep, and thank you so much once again for your time. Yeah, all good, Dr. Prem and Amanda. Have a great day ahead, and thanks for all the work that you're doing to encourage mental health discourse, discussions, policies in your field of work. It is extremely commendable and amazingly impressive and inspiring. Thank you so much.
Thank you for
Thank you
having
so much. Thank you for having me too.
All good. And yeah, so just to wanted to quickly say as well, we want to thank you for your generous contributions to today's discussions. We'll also be contacting you about a small token of appreciation soon, and your insights were extremely helpful, and we hope to stay in touch with you.
Take care.
Take
Yep.
care.
Thank
Thanks
you. Take
again.
care.
Bye.
All good. So, all right, everyone. We hope you enjoyed the discussion today, and it is about 12 p.m. Malaysian time, which is around 3 o'clock for us in Melbourne and 2 o'clock in Brisbane. Like, there's a lot of time zones going on around here. But for those whose questions were answered, we'll definitely get back to you via email and for further communications. So let's make sure that we continue to prioritize our mental health. And this will not only give us the motivation to keep pushing through our studies, but will also benefit our long-term health. Attending events like this are really important, I believe, to widen your personal perspective. And it is also equally important to apply what you learn to your daily life at the same time. All right, then. Let us now proceed to our lucky draw session then. Does Candice want to explain how this will be conducted?
Yep. So now the names of all registrants were placed in an online wheel spinner to be selected. The wheel will be spun 4 times, and the lucky 4 will be contacted to receive their prizes. Please note that once we announce the winners, they will have 30 seconds to respond in the Facebook comments. It could be as simple as just saying me or I'm here, and we just want to make sure you exist and are still here. Yeah.
Cool. All right, then let's begin with spinning the wheel. Exciting, exciting. Oh, Faris Ashraf. Faris Ashraf, if you're in if you're currently in the live stream, congratulations to you. Please comment in the chat so we know you're here. And the next winner is Farah Mardia. Congratulations, Farah. Please also type in the chat so that we know you are currently here and watching with us live. And our next winner is Sunwei. Congratulations, Sunwei. Please comment as well if you're right here. And finally, we have Shafiq Johari. Congratulations, Shafiq. And Farah is here, so we have our first lucky winner confirmed. Congratulations, Farah. Currently, we're still waiting on Faris, Sunwei, and Sunwei is here as well. Congratulations, Sunwei. So just Shafiq and Faris for Faris to comment. If not, we will have to pick a new winner. Yep, only a few more seconds to go before Faris and Shafiq. Unfortunately, we will have to select a new winner. All right, then, all good. With that, we would like to also reach out to those who have won via email. So we will be contacting you via the email you used to register. Like, congratulations to all winners so far. All right, then. In that case, we will have to do a new spin for a new winner. So we are going into a new spin again. All right, then. Congratulations, Vina. Vina, if you're here, please comment in the chat. And in the meantime, let's also select our second winner. Oh, congratulations, Anik bin Adi Zulkifli. Anik, if you're right here, please comment and congratulations to you. So Vina and Anik. Oh, and Vina is right here. So currently just waiting on Anik. And Anik is here as well. With that, we have all four of our lucky winners with Farah, Anik, Sunway, and Vina. Congratulations to all four of you. And we will be reaching out via email with the email you used to register. Thank you everybody for attending. And with that, we hope you gain a lot from attending today's Suara Muda. And Candice, would you like to close us off?
Yep. I just want to remind you all that the next Suara Muda will likely be held later in the year. So make sure you follow us on social media to stay updated, and we look forward to seeing you in future events. Before you leave, we would really appreciate it if you took the time to fill in our feedback form via the QR code on the screen. As a final word from us, please stay safe and take care.
Thank you for joining Suara Muda.